Good afternoon, everybody. This is Simeon. I am the executive officer of the Maryland Head Start Association. I think we may have some people here who are new, so I wanted to introduce myself. Thank you for joining us. And I have a couple of announcements, but I'm not going to take up too much time because I really want our guest, Anna Putnam, to have as much time as she needs to go over her information. I think you're really going to enjoy the presentation as we discuss grief and working with our children and families. I think is going to be a um, really good webinar, so to speak, for you. So without further ado, let me go ahead and get started with the information that I would like to present, and then we can move forward. We do have Tressa Hanna here as well, who's going to give us a couple of updates from the Maryland State Department of Education. So let me begin with a few updates from MHSA. I do want to remind you that the Parent of the Year celebration is on June 19th. Applications were actually due yesterday. So if you did not get to submit an application, please email Yvonne. And her email address is right there. It's operation_MHSA at md-hsa.org. This way she can get your application and we can make sure that we have every program represented. That's our goal, to have every program represented on this virtual celebration. You will get more instructions as to how the virtual celebration is going to work. So please make sure that you have your applications submitted so that we can move on with all of getting the instructions out. We're planning on doing small videos with each one of the honorees. All right. And we're calling them honorees, nominees, because there's not going to be a winner. We're just honoring our parents, not just honoring, but we're honoring our parents. So it's not really a competition. So we're calling them honorees. Okay. And if you have a Head Start program and an early Head Start program, you can submit a parent from each one of those programs. All right. So please make sure that you have those applications submitted to Yvonne. If you did not submit one by yesterday, please make sure you reach out to her so that you can talk with her about submitting your honorees. I'd also like to announce that March 8th through 11th, 2021, we're going to have an MHSA and Judy Center Education Conference. This conference was originally planned for October of this year, but due to the current situation, we had to postpone it. It's now scheduled for March 8th through 11th, 2021. It's going to be at the Hyatt Regency in Cambridge, Maryland. It's going to be very good. You will definitely get information about it, hopefully sooner than later. We're working through all of the, we put out a call for presenters, and we're working through all of the literature and the branding of it and all of that kind of stuff. But it should be out to you soon. So make sure that you're looking forward to that. I'd also like to let you know, last week we had a discussion about PPE, and there is a program called the Maryland Emergency Management Agency. Okay, and they are accepting donations from people. Now, give me 1 second. I'm getting some messages that people cannot hear. I hope everyone can hear. If you can hear me, please just put in the chat that you can hear me. I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me. Okay. And it's not on your end. I want to see if it's on my end. Okay, I see some people say they can hear me. Okay, good. All right. So the Maryland Emergency, let me get that name correct again. The Maryland Emergency Management Agency. Uh, they have a program where they're collecting personal protective equipment and they are distributing it to programs. Right now, I spoke with them last week and we discussed whether or not Head Start was eligible for the program. They are looking to see, I guess there's different sources, there's different way, they're going through different companies. There's like a private and then there's state on how they're distributing the protective equipment. I had a conversation with them. They're going to their whatever meeting they have to determine where Head Start programs will fit. In the meantime, what I am doing is I need to collect from you what kind of supplies you need, and I have some of that information, right? What kind of supplies you need, and how much of those supplies you need. So I have a survey that's going to go around, and as soon as I am off of this meeting today, the survey is going to go around to you. But let me get it up so you can kind of see what it looks like. All right, what you see on your screen now. Oh, excuse me. Let me get it back up there. All right, so what you see on your hold up. There we go. So what you see on your screen now is the survey that'll go around, and it might be kind of light. All right, but it's going to ask you for your name, address, the organization name, the organization address, contact phone number, and then the items that they have available. All right, the items they have available, they have gloves, and there's a limit of 2 boxes per program. Face shields, a limit of 2 boxes. Masks, surgical, limit of 5 boxes. Protective ponchos and individual blankets. This is what they have right now. And so what you would need to do is fill this out. All right, check the items that you're requesting, and then put in the number of items that you would need. Right, and then we need, you don't need an exact date, but try to give us a roundabout date. When would you need these items? Right, and then there's a couple of other questions. Do you have space to house a bulk order of supplies? And if you do, 'cause I asked you this last week and some people did respond to me. And if you do have space, are you willing to allow organizations outside of Head Start to pick up their order of supplies? Right. And, if you're not, there's no explanations needed. Just, we understand, there could be, you could have issues with staff, whatever it is. But some programs may. Because right now they have certain locations where you can pick up supplies. And, for us, we're all across the state. So we need to have a system where a bulk order of supplies can go to one location that's maybe, let's say, close to the Eastern Shore. And then those programs can come, programs that are close there can go to pick up their supplies, Southern Maryland, Western Maryland, etc. All right. And I know I've heard from some people, but I didn't hear from everyone. So if you are available, if you do have space and you are able to allow other programs, outside agencies to pick up their supplies if they're in your region, please let me know. This may be able to help them out tremendously if it's possible. All right. So please look forward to getting that survey within it right after, as soon as we're done with this meeting here. I'd also, let me get back to my slide. There's an updated PPE section on our website. All right, so please take some time to check that out. All right, and you can click right here where it says PPE resources. You click there and you'll see that it scrolls. Right now we have Kaplan, We have the food and supply source, which they came and did a presentation for us last week. And then we have Everclean. And I do want to take a look at Everclean real quick. Now, they have a video, but I'm not sure if the video can play without skipping. But it's something that's interesting. I'd like you all to take a look and let me know if you think this is something worth having for your classroom. I'm going to try to play the video. If the video doesn't play well, please let me know. So there's these things here called pure tabs, I guess pure tabs. And they go to a machine, right? They're safer for people, deadly for infectious agents. Right? And this is supposed to be a more efficient, a more safe way to disinfect anything. Right? They use it in gyms, hospitals, classrooms. I'm going to try to play this video, and hopefully this works, and hopefully you can hear it. Please let me know. If not, I will make sure that you have this video so that you can understand. It's called the Protexis Electrostatic Spraying System. And I got this information from the meeting we had this morning with the Office of Head Start. So I'm going to try to play the video. Hopefully it comes out for you all. This presentation will introduce you to the power of revolutionary technology that is changing the way most things around us.
I think you need to share computer sound.
Using our product quickly just takes a few simple steps to get started. Remember, our team will. Okay, so you're not able to hear it. All right. So you're not able to hear that. Someone said I may need to share the computer sound. I'm not sure if I'm able to
settings or with share screen. Maybe
yeah,
before.
I have the screen shared.
So unshare the screen, and when you're about to reshare, maybe you'll see the option for sharing sound, or someone else could say.
Yeah, so let me see. I'm gonna go back to share screen. I'm gonna try to share the actual video and see if that works. Gonna try that. Okay, so now let me know if you can hear it at least. Can you hear that?
It's the same, but there should be some place where you can click off or select share computer sound. Because it'll feed it directly through the,
right, directly from the computer.
It's almost like listening in is what we're doing now.
Right. Yeah, I don't see where I can share the computer.
Maybe in your settings.
Yeah, I'm in the audio settings now.
Defaults. I think it's about your default.
Let me try. Tell me if you can hear this now.
Same. It's the same, Simeon.
Okay, so you all weren't able to hear it. All right. Well, I will make sure that I send it around. Again, the name of the company is Everclean. Okay, and it's Everclean Pure Tabs, and they have this spray gun that you can use, and basically when you put the tabs in, you spray it. You can spray the tables, you can spray anything in the classroom, and it disinfects the classroom. It shortens the time, and it's supposed to be more powerful, and more safe. Okay, so I will make sure that you can go to our website, md-mhsa.org. You can go to our website and review it, and you can also you can go to our website and click on the link, and then it'll take you to their website so that you can review it. All right, and I will find a way to, maybe on the next call so that I can make sure that you all can hear it if you didn't get a chance to view it. All right. So, I don't want to take up too much time. The information is available on our website, so you can check that out. But it's something that's very interesting, and it may help us out tremendously in the classroom. To help sanitize our classrooms. All right. So let me get back to. Now I got to get back to my. Oh, let me get back to sharing the screen, and we'll move on from there. All right. So please take a look at that if you get a chance. I'm sorry I wasn't able to share the video, but it is something that I think you should take a look at. And then I also want to let you know that we will have a strategic planning survey that'll be distributed by the end of the week, just to get some information from you as to, some of the things that you might need, going forward as we plan to address issues surrounding COVID-19 and getting, starting back to school next program year. And some of the professional development, advocacy needs, those type of things that you will need from us. All right, so please look forward to that planning survey by the end of this week. Now I'd like to hand it over to Tressa, who will give us some updates from MSDE.
Hi, everybody. Glad to see y'all. The first thing I wanted to say was that if you go to the marylandpublicschools.org website, there's a resource there for everybody called Maryland Together, Maryland's Recovery Plan for Education. So that's a draft of some of the ideas and thoughts that they're thinking for reopening schools. Again, it's Maryland Together, Maryland's Recovery Plan for Education. So I think at about the same time we were talking last Wednesday, Dr. Salmon was introducing this plan. So as everybody probably knows, schools are closed for the rest of the year, and I don't think we'll be jumping back together too quickly. So take a look and see what you think. That's the first thing I wanted to say. The second thing is we've increased the Early Childhood Advisory Committee meetings to a monthly meeting, and I believe that they're held on the first Wednesday of the month from 10 to 12. So we've asked a couple people to see if they could talk and about the particular things that their programs are doing. And Shannon Burroughs Campbell has agreed, and Angela Card has agreed, and I'm very excited to showcase some of the innovative ways that Head Starts are going to be opening for business or continuing business in whatever form that it's going to be. So I think Shannon's going to use some of her Head Start state supplemental. She is going to use it to continue some virtual learning. And I think Angela Card has some great ideas for how she's going to use some additional funding to support families and children in emotional health. And the third thing I wanted to say was that the Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation Project is still working. It's virtually. Hello, Kathleen. So some of my infant and early childhood mental health consultation projects are working directly with directors and staff and people like that might be having a lot of stress and issues. And some of them are giving them resources. But I'm going to send Simeon the flyer to say that they are up and open. and they'll have various ways of talking to people and trying to help out in this situation. So those were the main things I wanted to address. Did I forget anything, Simeon?
No, I don't think so. I think you addressed everything. I do have up on the screen the Maryland Together,
Thank you.
the Maryland's Recovery Plan for Education. If you all have not seen this document, I'll send it to you, but you can also go to the COVID-19 page on the website, and there's a link to it. As a matter of fact, there's an entire link to MSDE, just as MSDE COVID-19 info page, and you'll be able to get any update that's provided by MSDE. But there's also a link to this document.
And Simeon, I just sent you the flyer for the early childhood mental health consultation contact information.
Okay. All right. I didn't get it yet, but I'll make sure that when I do a follow-up email, I'll make sure that I send it out with the follow-up email.
It's not just for kids.
Okay. All right.
Anybody have any questions for me? Okay. Thank you all very much.
Okay. And the last thing before I go to Ms. Putnam and I hand the controls over to Ms. Putnam, I am working to have one of the grant managers from Region 3 to join us, maybe on the next call. If not the next call, then the call after. If you have any questions about, just the grant money. Brenda Hewitt was on the last call. She may not have had all of those answers. The grant manager may have a few more answers to your questions in that regard. So I'll make sure that I'm going to try to get that person to come on next week if possible. If not, then maybe the following week. But I'm pushing for next week. So without further ado, I'd like to bring Miss Ann Putnam. I was about to say to the stage, but not to the stage. I'd like to, introduce her so that she can, she's going to take over the controls of the meeting, and she's going to talk to us about supporting children and families through grief. So let me get the controls over to Ms. Putnam. Ms. Putnam, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yep. Maybe, hopefully everyone can hear you. Maybe a little bit low.
Okay. Let me pull the computer closer. See if that
Okay.
helps. Is that better?
Yeah, that's a little better.
Okay, great.
All right. I am going to make you the presenter.
Great. There we go. Okay. Yeah, feel free to jump in or write in the chat box if you can't hear me well. Thank you, Simeon, for inviting me to be here today. As he said, my name is Anna Putnam. I work with an organization in Towson called Project ACT. We provide support to child care providers in preschools, mainly in Baltimore County, Cecil County, and Harford County. But we also provide trainings throughout the state of Maryland. And so one of the trainings that I am in the process of writing is about grief, death, and loss. And I presented it at a conference for MSDE and Head Start about a year ago, I think. So hopefully this summer, actually, I will be submitting the final conference or the final draft of the presentation to MSDE to get approved so that then it can be used as a training and you all can get credit for it, or your teachers can get credit. So today is just like a little sneak peek sort of and sort of the quick and dirty version of some basic tips and ideas to sort of help you and help your children and your families during this very strange time. So jumping right in, the first thing I want to talk about is the idea that grief is not a problem to be solved. It's an experience to be carried. So in our culture, in our society, we often think about grief as something that your loved one passes away, and then you have your grief period, and it's very, finite. It fits into this nice, neat box, and then you move on and you're over it. And as anyone who has ever lost a loved one knows, that is not how grief works at all. Grief is very much something that you carry with you for your entire life. And the shape of it, the way that it feels, the way that it interacts with you in your life will change, but it never really goes away. And I think that's particularly important right now because what we are experiencing with COVID is trauma. It is a traumatic experience that we as a society are experiencing right now. So this is a wonderful list of some reminders from a therapist. I think her name is Jennifer Yeager, that's been circulating around on Facebook. And so she talks about how the importance of what we're experiencing right now really is a societal trauma experience. And so the way that we are functioning right now is probably a lot different than our normal because we're working with some really hard stuff. And the piece that I want to really remind you all about as you are the directors and the teachers that will be interacting with children in the future is that our process of trauma is similar to our process of grief in that it takes years to work through all of those experiences. So, hypothetically speaking, if we go back to school in September and everything is back to normal, no more masks, no more COVID fears, we will still be seeing the effects of what's happening in our society right now on ourselves and on our children, because it takes a long time to really work through all of that trauma and all of that experience. That's the case for everyone, and I think it's especially the case for people who have lost loved ones. And that being said, it seems likely that even if we do go back to school in September, that this is not the end of the COVID experience. And so it's going to keep coming up over and over again, unfortunately. Okay, so then looking at grief specifically, grief at any age is unique to each person, from children to adults. There are definitely some sort of hallmarks of grief and things that we see typically when someone is grieving, but really everyone's experience is going to be different. And every time that you experience a loss, your grief will be different. So your grief right now over the loss of a loved one might be different than if you lose a loved one, say, next year, depending on where you are in your life and what's going on. So it's unique to every person. For children, that level of grief and their reaction of grief depends a lot upon their age. It depends upon their sort of mental and emotional stage of development, their patterns of communication and interaction, especially within the family unit. It depends upon the relationship with the person who has died, previous experiences with grief, and then whatever sort of religious and cultural organizations that person has. And so the example I sort of like to give is that if you are working with a child who is, say, 5 years old, as many of you probably are, their understanding and an idea of death and loss will be much different than a child who is 10. However, if the 10-year-old has a developmental disability and has sort of a cognitive processing level of a 5-year-old, they will understand grief at the level of a 5-year-old. They'll understand loss at the level of a 5-year-old. And then another example, if that 5-year-old has lived through a lot of loss in their life, maybe their parents have both passed away and then their caregivers then have been passed away, or if they've been in the foster care system and they've moved around a lot, that child is going to have a much different experience and understanding of grief and loss than someone who is 10 and has maybe only ever had their pet dog die. So those are all things that part of what makes grief really messy is that it's so unique to that person, and it's so unique to that child's level and sort of their experience of life. For children, grief feelings come and go in spurts. It's kind of like a roller coaster in terms of 1 minute they might be sobbing and crying and clinging to your legs and just having this total emotional meltdown because they really miss that loved one. And whereas for adults, I think we would probably then need some time to recover from that. We might have to go take a nap, take a bubble bath, those kinds of things. For a child, 5 minutes later, they're up and they're playing and they're running and they have a big smile on their face and they're so happy and ready to go. And it's sort of, for us as adults, it's like, wow, what just happened? That's normal for kids. Children have a much smaller sort of window of how long they are able to process information and hold information. And so it's totally normal for them to 1 minute be totally broken up about it, and then the next minute they're off and they're playing and they're happy-go-lucky. So if you see that in children, don't be concerned. That's totally normal. Another important thing for children is that grief takes place over a longer period of time. As especially the children that you all are working with at Head Start, those children are really young, and they at that age often don't understand what death means or what loss means. And so you might not see any change in the child or any reaction that they have lost a significant person in their life. But down the road, as they get older and they sort of learn more about the world and about life, they're going to revisit that loss and revisit that grief and then re-grieve over and over and over again, unfortunately. But that's part of the healing process, is that it happens long-term for children. And especially if it was a really important person like a primary caregiver, that loss is going to impact them in years to come. And so you might not see it right now, but it will be there. And then the final big piece sort of that I want to touch on is the impact of religion and culture on how we grieve. So children developed sort of concepts and emotional responses to death and loss based on what they see or don't see adults in their life doing, based on what they see on TV, literature, media, their peers, everything else in the environment around them. So a child of color growing up in inner city Baltimore likely has a much different experience of death and loss than a child who is white growing up in rural Cecil County. And in that same way, someone who was raised Catholic is going to have a much different experience and understanding of death than someone who was Muslim. And so those, again, are all really important pieces to keep in mind when you are working with and supporting families. And so as much as you can sort of know about the experience of the loss is really helpful for you as the adult in supporting that children and supporting those families. Let me take a sip of water here. So one of the things that is really hard for us as adults is talking to children about death, especially the 4, 5, 3-year-olds. It's really hard to find the words to explain that to children. And so this is a wonderful definition that I've borrowed from Alan Wolfelt. He is an author that writes a lot about grief and loss, especially for children. And so his definition says, when people die, their bodies stop working. They don't see, hear, feel, eat, or breathe anymore. Once the body completely stops working, it will never start again, and the person can never come back. And so this is really important for 3 reasons. This is sort of a perfect definition of death for 3 reasons. The first one is that it's providing accurate information. Children, I think everyone, adults and children, we are often scared of the unknown. And so when we as adults don't tell children what death means or what has happened when someone dies, children's brains tend to freak out. They tend to get really scared because they don't know what's happened to this person. You know, where is grandma? How come I can't see her anymore? And so the first step in sort of helping a child grieve is giving them really accurate information. And so you tell them their body stopped working. It's also important here to use the words dead, die, death, things like that. And that for us, that feels weird because as adults, we usually use euphemisms. We say things like they've passed on, they're no longer with us, I've lost that person. For a child, that is really confusing. If I said, that I lost my grandma, a child might say, well, how come you can't find her? Let's go look for her. And so with children, you have to use those concrete words and then define them for the child so that they can really know what it means. So the second part of this definition that's really helpful is you define it as it relates to functions that are familiar to the child. So a child knows what it's like to see, to hear, to feel, to eat, to breathe. And so then if you say that someone who has died no longer does those things, that really helps them better understand what it means to be dead. And then the other piece that's really important to explain to children is the finality, that once you die, you can't come back, that's the end. Otherwise, children get confused and they might want to talk about, well, how come we can't find grandma? How come we can't go see daddy? And I'll talk a little bit more about religion and stuff in a minute because I know that also is important to some people and plays a part. So that's a very good definition to use. So when talking to children, how do you have those conversations? Again, it's very intimidating for most of us. So the first thing is talk openly about death around children. When we don't talk about death, children often perceive it then as something bad or shameful. They might have really confusing or overwhelming ideas, but they don't know that it's okay for them to ask those questions. They might have anxiety about, am I going to die next? And they don't know that it's okay to ask those questions and get reassurance. Not talking openly about death is a huge disservice to our children because it confuses them and it really sets them up for a mess of complicated feelings later as they get older. So being open to your children and letting them know that they can come to you is important. Another important thing to do is give children space to tell their story. So part of healing from a significant loss, from grief, and also part of healing from trauma involves telling your story of what happened. Sometimes you have to tell that story many, many times over and over again. In children, especially young children, like preschool age, they don't necessarily have the words or the language to describe and talk about what happened. And so they are going to tell their story through play. They're going to tell their story through drawing or painting, through games, through that roller coaster of emotions, the ups and downs, and also by asking lots of questions. And so how you can support children is giving them that space, giving them puppets, giving them a doll and doll houses, things like that. All of those things where they can sort of do creative, imaginative play and let them tell their story. And then another thing you can do is help them name their feelings and find outlets. So that roller coaster of emotions, all of those ups and downs that children are probably going to experience, sometimes children need help channeling those emotions. So letting children know it's okay that you feel angry and mad and frustrated that mom isn't there anymore. But it's not okay, to hit your friends when you feel mad. Instead, let's go, scribble on this paper really fast. Let's have a pillow that you can punch. Let's go outside and run really fast. Or, if a child is really sad, talking about, okay, I see that you feel really sad. Let's go hug this teddy bear. Do you want to sit in my lap during story time? Do you want to stay in the cozy corner and just cry for a minute? And so just really giving children those labels and that space. The other piece about feelings around loss that can be really confusing for children is having conflicting feelings. So a child might feel, really sad that their grandparent has died. But then they also feel really happy when they think about grandpa and those fishing trips and all those fun things they did together. Or a child might feel really sad that the sibling has passed away. And then they might feel guilty that, like, excuse me, maybe they feel relieved that they're no longer at the hospital anymore. Maybe they feel relieved that their parents, are a little more available sometimes. Grief has messy emotions like that. And so for children, that can be really confusing because typically as adults, we show, okay, it's okay to be sad when you're upset. And then helping children realize that there's a wide range of emotions that you can feel around grief, and it's okay to have all of them. It's just sort of a matter of what you do with those feelings. So some other suggestions. Allow children to ask questions. This one, again, can be really hard because we often don't have the answers. However, it's important to create that, loving, warm space for your children where they feel comfortable and they feel like they can process their grief. And part of that, especially in our young friends, is being able to ask questions about, why did grandpa die? How did he die? Why didn't, grandma die? Am I going to die? All of those things. As best as you can, as best as you are able, provide your answers in a brief, matter-of-fact way. Again, going back to you want to provide accurate information is really important. And since children have sort of a short window of time where they're able to process information, don't give them the 10-minute lecture or conversation. Make it short and sweet. And at the end of the day, also, if you don't know, just respond with honesty and care and compassion. Children can pick up on us when we are genuine and when we are honest, and when we're not. And so if you answer with genuine honesty and care, the children will appreciate that. And also don't be afraid to say, I don't know, because we often don't know sometimes the answers to these questions. If a child is older or has really good language skills, it's a really great idea if you are able to sort of check their understanding. So have that conversation with them and then ask them, so what do you think happened to grandpa? How do you feel about what happened to grandpa? Things like that. You want to make sure that the child really understands the conversation that you've had and that they still aren't carrying feelings of like guilt or blame or shame. Children tend to have magical thinking, which is beautiful and wonderful. The tricky part about it around death is that oftentimes children think that it's their fault. So, the last conversation I had with my brother, I said, I hate you and you're a butthead. And so the child might then think that that's why their brother died, was because I said, I hate you and you're a butthead. And for a child to carry that would be awful. So asking those questions to sort of tease out what their thinking is and what their understanding is, and then explaining to them, no, you did not cause your brother to die. You didn't make that happen. Addressing concerns is really important. Since death is sort of this mysterious concept to children, they often get really concerned after they have experienced the loss of a loved one. Am I going to die? Is mom going to die? All of those kinds of things. So as much as you can, answering those questions as honestly as you can, but also without giving false hope. So you don't want to say you're never going to die, because that actually isn't true. At some point, all of us are. But you can say, most of us live for a long, long time. Most of us live long, happy, healthy lives, and we will be around for a long time. And reassuring them, I'm going to do whatever I can to keep you safe. And then finally, it's sort of the religious piece. So that is, of course, up to the individual family, how they want to talk to their children and what they want to explain to their child. The thing that gets tricky is that religious concepts and explanations of death and loss are often not very concrete, and they're hard for children to understand. And so as much as you are able, working with your parents, having sort of the practical explanation as well as the religious explanation is really important. So the example that I read in one of the books that I read when I was doing research for this training is, a family explains to the child, well, Daddy is in heaven with God now. And the child might say, well, let's get in the car and go get Daddy, because to them, that would be completely reasonable. Or they might be really scared that God is going to take away Mommy as well. Mommy's going to go to heaven and be with God too. And then who's going to take care of me? And so that is all really hard for that little kid brain to understand. And so if you're able to explain, yeah, Daddy is in heaven with God because his heart stopped working. Daddy's in heaven with God because he, got this illness called COVID that made him really sick, and then he died from it. So if you can sort of use both the religious and that practical piece, that's really going to help the child better understand sort of the finality of the death. So that's sort of the conversational piece of sort of how to have those actual conversations. But there are definitely some other things that you can do to really support the children that are going to be in your care. Kids love routine and they love consistency. And that is definitely the case when children are grieving from a loss. Also the case when children have experienced trauma. They want to be in safe environments and they want to be around familiar, loving people. The tricky part here with you all is that, come fall, you're probably going to have new kids coming into your center, and that's going to be really scary for them because it's a new experience and COVID has sort of rocked their world. So as much as you can, sort of having that routine, that consistency is really going to help them feel safe. For a child who is grieving, they need that consistency, but then you also sometimes might have to make exceptions. Like maybe they can stay in the cozy corner and, cry and then have a nap, even though it's not nap time, because that's just what their body needs right then for that day. Another thing you can do is be patient. Children are confused by the world around them a lot of times, and so they have to ask those questions over and over and over again. They have to ask the why questions, why, over and over and over again, and they probably need to hear the answers over and over and over again. So as much as you can take that deep breath when they ask you the question for the 500th time and then just respond, that will be really helpful. And remind yourself too that that's part of how they are processing their grief. As I said earlier, allowing space and time for really expressive activities. So art, drama, poetry, music, journaling for older children, and then really just the expressive free play. So letting kids have, the dress-up costumes, letting them have the action figures or the people figurines, so that they can sort of work through those feelings of grief is really going to be helpful. For some kids, especially if it's a loss of a loved one that was a caregiver or someone really close to them, they might need an object to sort of help them feel safe and stable. So the teddy bear, maybe it's a blanket, a stuffed animal. It could also be an object that's connected to the memory of the loved one. So maybe they want to carry around a picture of mom, or they want to carry around, a blanket that mom crocheted or something like that. That's really going to help that child feel comfortable and safe to have that object. And then finally, a really important way of supporting children is to take care of yourself. Supporting someone else in their experience through loss and grief can be really triggering for the caregiver, whoever the person is that's caring, even if that loss took place a long time ago. So pay attention to your own feelings and your own emotions, and get whatever support that you need to make sure that you can be the best caregiver to the child that you're serving. And that's especially, I think, true right now, during this time of chaos, is that we have to take care of ourselves so that when we do go back to work, to the normal life, we're sort of ready to be on our A game and support our children. In terms of talking to the caregivers of the children and to other adults who have lost a loved one, because the reality is that COVID is hitting everyone, and so it might be that you have children in your center, and as well as teachers or coworkers who've lost loved ones. So a couple ideas when working with adults. Oftentimes when we know that someone has lost a loved one, we feel really hesitant to ask them about it because we don't want to trigger them or upset them. The thing to keep in mind, though, is that when you are grieving, you never stop thinking about that loss. That loss is like a ton of bricks, and it's always weighing on you. So asking your coworker, asking the parent, how are you doing since your husband died? That might be upsetting to the person, but it's not because you asked, it's because they lost their loved one. And in a lot of ways, it's probably comforting because then they know that you are a person who is showing care and love and compassion and who's there for you. So don't shy away from asking those questions about how you're really doing. If you are working with a child who has lost a loved one, maintain that communication with the caregivers. As much as you can, tell them, this is how Johnny is doing in school. This is, how they've been processing feelings. This is the conversation we had today about the loss of their loved one. And then as much as you can, try to initiate those conversations to receive that information as well is helpful. Having resources on hand is always helpful. That way, if a caregiver is sort of, I don't know how to talk about this, I don't know what to do, you can say, oh, I have this great handout that tells you, how to talk to children about loss. That can be really helpful. And then the other piece is to offer help in very specific ways. So when someone has lost a loved one, your world is rocked. Your world is completely shook. And so by saying, how can I help you? That person maybe doesn't know because they're having, a hard enough time getting out of bed in the morning. But if you are able to give specific suggestions, that can be really helpful. So can I make dinner for you? Can I bring you paper products so you don't have to wash dishes? Can I coordinate transportation for you? Very tangible, specific things that then the person can say, yes, I need that. No, I don't. In terms of resources, these are a few of the agencies and websites that I have found that have really great resources about grief and loss. I've also emailed Simeon 3 different handouts that you can feel free to share. One of them has just sort of these websites listed and books as well that might be helpful. One handout has common grief reactions. So what is sort of normal grief? Not that there is anything normal about it, but what's more typical? What sort of things can you kind of expect to see? And then there also lists some things that are sort of red flags of if you see this, you might want to call in a mental health professional. Call in, somebody to do another observation and see, is this a concerning behavior? Because it's possible that they are really struggling with that grief and maybe they need the support of a therapist or a counselor. And then the last handout is developmental responses to grief. So it looks at different age groups and what is typical or what you often see in grief reactions of children during those ages and how you can better support them. And then finally, here is our contact information. My information, if you have questions, concerns, if you want more resources, if you're interested more in about what Project ACT does, there is our information there. Any questions or thoughts or ideas that people want to share?
Hi, Anna, this is Simeon. I did want to, all of our programs are most likely going to be developing recovery plans. Would you recommend putting something in your recovery plan that has to do with professional development around grief and working with the staff so that they, can get a good hand on dealing with grief as it pertains to the children and the families?
I would. I think both in terms of the loss, in terms of death, because it's hitting everyone. I think everyone at this point probably knows someone who has lost a loved one, if not themselves. But also because the experience that we're having is traumatic. It's overwhelming, and we don't really know how to process it because we've never done it before. Nobody has ever lived through a pandemic like this. And most of the support and ideas that come around supporting people through grief are similar to those that support people through trauma. So yes, I think that would be very helpful.
Okay. All right. Any questions from anyone? If let me get you unmuted in the event that you have questions, and just give me 1 second as I fiddle through this a little bit to try to get everybody unmuted. You can also put your questions in the chat box. Okay, I've just unmuted people, so if you have a question, please feel free to ask a question. Okay, well, if you don't have questions today and you do have questions in the future, again, Anna's information is right here on the screen. You can email me, you can email her, and I'm sure she'll get back to you as soon as, quickly, very quickly. And Anna, thank you very much. We'd love to have you come back again because there's, a few other topics that I think we need to address.
Yeah. No, I would be happy to come back.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
All right. Okay. I am going to return to my screen, and I do think that I found a solution so that you guys can hear the video. So I will try one more time. But before then, I do just really would like to stress, developing a plan, a recovery plan is going to be important for everyone, I think, for all of our programs. There are going to be, I know the TNTA network, Region 3, our region, the OHS, they're developing they're having an online conference, so to speak, or a strategy planning session, so to speak, so that you can begin to work on those things. And that's going to happen somewhere around June, I believe. So, please just have that in your mind, have that in the back of your mind. And when we put out our survey to assess, what kind of strategies we need as we recover, there'll be some questions in there about it. And I was just alerted that, it's 3:33. So instead of playing the video now, I'll just go ahead and let you look at the video yourself. Again, it's on the website. And then next week we can talk about it if you think that's something that would be beneficial for the classrooms. I do, that spray gun is, I think it's kind of expensive. But anyway, I appreciate you guys for being here and for sitting through all of the technical difficulties, or not all of, at least that technical difficulty. Thank you for being here and being patient. Hopefully, you really got something out of the webinar with Anna Putnam. I thought it was really good. Hopefully, you got a lot out of it, and we'll gladly have her come back and offer up some more information to us. This video has been recorded. It'll be posted on YouTube. There's a whole playlist of all of these meetings on YouTube. You'll be able to go into the description and click on the timestamp, and it'll take you to whatever you want to listen to. So if you want to listen to that webinar again, I have the timestamp there, and you'll be able to click into it and then go listen to it. I am going to break it down to its own video so that you can listen to that video. You can share that video with whoever you think is necessary. All right. So with that being said, I'll leave it open for any last questions or comments. And if none, then, we'll head on. But, if you have any last questions or comments, you can leave it in the chat, or you can just ask the question. I do have people unmuted at the moment. Okay. Well, what I will do is I'm going to send out all the information, and next week, like I said, I'm going to try to have the grants manager here from Region 3. If not, we'll likely have another presentation. So again, thank you for joining us, and I will talk to you next week. Have a great week.
Thank you, Simeon.
Thank you.
Simeon.
Thanks, Timmy, and enjoyed the training. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Simeon.